welcome to Movies, Films, and Flicks. I am Mark Hoffmeyer, and joining me is a really peachy keen guy. It's Chris Kelly.
Hey, everybody.
It was either that or call you a fart knocker.
I'm glad that you went with this first.
Because Gwen calls somebody a fart knocker in
She
this.
calls the two cops that.
And she's a beast in this movie. Gwen is a monster, and I love her for that. She's a beast. Makes me so happy. She whacks that dude in the head with a rock, and then they just sit together during the fight.
Yeah, I like that.
Oh,
moment.
and spoilers, by the way, for this episode.
For those of you who haven't seen, I like that. I like that moment whenever she throws the rock during the fight, and then hits the guy in the head, and then she eventually gets smacked around, and she just crawls and sits with him.
Yeah,
it's like, that's accurate. It's like, look, we both got whipped.
Yeah,
but there's no reason to get into it.
If you think about those fights back in the day when you were a kid, you have those scraps and then you just it's over. Like, it just feels like one of those. That's another thing I really like about this movie, where it's portraying the late 70s not as like a bubbly disco-ridden vibe. Like, this is the suburbs of Denver. This is like, they make sure to sort of desaturate it. This isn't an idealized version of the late 70s, 80s. I kind of like this world that they live in.
I like that a lot of times in movies, whenever they take place in the past, it's more of a romanticized version of it. That it's more, you would have seen, depending on the director, of course. But Scott Derrickson is one of my favorite horror filmmakers currently.
Sinister.
Dude.
There's lawnmowers in that one.
So good. Speaking of my tattoo.
Yeah. I got a new lawnmower tattoo now.
What about The Exorcism of Emily Rose?
There's a lawnmower in that?
There's two. No.
And wait, Brain Dead too. Peter Jackson. A lot of lawnmower in that.
The Lawnmower Man also has.
A lot of lawnmower in that. Does he mow a lawn in Son-in-Law? What movie
did Pauly Shore do that he has a lawnmower in? No, he had a
Encino Man.
Yeah, because
he pulls the.
There is a lawnmower in that. Oh my God. Hoffmeyer.
Can't Buy Me Love. There's a great lawnmower scene on that. Can't Nowhere.
That's the popcorn scene.
Waterboy.
Really good lawnmower in that.
Man, my tattoo collection is going to be ridiculous. I'm just going to do that. The top 10 lawnmowers of cinema. We should do that. Lawnmower scenes of cinema draft.
There you go. Now that's what we should do. Actually, that sounds like a.
We should do that.
We have the next pod up.
Yeah.
Best lawnmowers in movies.
We just went over most of them. I got my number one pick.
Oh, The Exorcism of Emily Rose. That was beyond excellent. Horror. Scott Derrickson, he has a really good way of looking at things whenever he makes movies. He doesn't make them take place in an alternate world. I think he makes them take place in the real world. Whereas with The Black Phone, whenever another director, a lot of times whenever people make movies that take place in the past, they do the romanticized side of it, which is in the 70s, you would be either disco or they would overly make rock and roll, where they would make the characters look very polished and attractive, but they would be into hardcore punk rock, which would not make a lot of sense. Mm-hmm. What I liked about The Black Phone is that you're in what looks like a realistic 70s. I mean, the kids they look like kids. They don't look like they would be... The kids
from Scary Movie.
Yes. They don't look dressed up. They look like how kids looked at the time. I grew up in the 80s more, but that's kind of how kids looked with crimped hair. That was huge.
I had a mullet.
Did you?
Yeah.
I had a bowl cut.
I had a bowl cut too.
Everybody did.
Man. That thing was gnarly.
Then later on, I
kept it for too long.
I grew my hair out real long. I became a big fan of Jim Morrison in my teenage years. My hair went down past my shoulders.
Whoa!
What's also more intense is that my hair is very thick and very wavy. And I remember whenever I was...
Chris Kelly, you have a great hairline.
Whenever I was a teenager, I remember all the girls would come up to my hair and just be like, "How do you get it to do that?" I was just like, that's just how it is. I used VO5.
You go, Chris Kelly. That's what you said. But first of all, foremost, I do, before we get too much further into this, I want to say thank you. I watched this movie recently. I've been working on a research project for it, and this has been a huge hit of 2022. It's made about $150 million. I mean, you have Derrickson and Ethan Hawke reuniting after Sinister. It's a great team up. Also, The Exorcism of Emily Rose made a lot of money. But I called you in on this short notice. Normally, Chris Kelly loves to do a ton of notes, but I'm still sure you found more than most people would have found. But you like to have scripts. You like to have everything written out. So I appreciate you coming in on just a day's notice, but still with a lot of notes in it. But this movie is really interesting for me because I just want to see. We haven't even talked about it yet, and I think this movie has done a great job of blending everything that successful movies do to, like, most successful horror films do. So Derrickson did call it like the anti-Amblin. He didn't want it to have the Amblin feel, but you still have the kids. If you watch it recently, it made gonzo money. It Chapter 2 made gonzo money. A Quiet Place 1 and 2 made insane amounts of money. You have child endangerment in those. You look back in Jaws, kids are in danger. Exorcist is about a kid in danger. The Sixth Sense, that's about a kid who can speak to ghosts. You have Gremlins, Amityville Horror, The Omen, like a lot of the highest Poltergeist, a lot of the highest Aliens. I just keep reading. The Ring, a lot of the Halloween. Sorry. All right, I'm gonna stop. Us, but a lot of the highest grossing movies really involve like child endangerment, children in the stories. But then also this movie brings in a slight kind of religious angle where you look at maybe like The Exorcist. You look at other movies that have done really well in those regards. But then it also brings in kind of like a serial killer angle, which has also been kind of huge just with like Seven, those movies, Silence of the Lambs, those movies blow up, a good basement involved. So I think it did a good job of really, horror movies always borrowed from each other. But I think this also is adapted from Joe Hill's short story, which I listened to, you read. But I think it did a great job of really combining many elements that do feel familiar, but also being successful in its own right. And I just wanted to talk to you about that because it does, like when I was watching it, I felt like, oh, there's some Shining vibes here. When I watched it, I felt, some really heavy sort of It vibes. I mean, Joe Hill and Stephen King, father and son. But it still lives on, kind of breathes in its own universe, if that makes sense. But I just think it does a great job of combining really audience-friendly elements and also putting kids in danger and doesn't feel totally exploitative. And the box office has been extraordinary. Critics love it, audiences love it, and the people around the world love it. So I don't know how you feel about that, like with The Black Phone and how it combined all the elements to become successful.
With The Black Phone, which the return to more of a raw, gritty feel. This kid, I mean, he's hopeless.
Yeah.
There is nothing going on. I mean, it's like when you're watching it, you don't think there's a lot he can do to come back. Like, he's effed.
Yeah, and Mason's in trouble.
As you find out that the grabber, who in the short story is called Al, or the Fat Man.
Or John Wayne Gacy.
Exactly. I mean, it's obviously, I'm not going to get into John Wayne Gacy, but if he's modeled after that character. He's done this in the past, so he's planning to do it again very clearly. And there's not much that Finney can do.
No.
And that's what I think draws a lot of the terror from it, because deep down inside, when we were all kids growing up, our parents always told us, never talk to strangers, which is actually the tagline. And, only talk to the people that you recognize. You walk home from school, you only talk to your friends, and then that's it. You never, like, something that whenever the grabber, and whenever he eventually takes Finney, he does the thing that most people wouldn't have thought about. He falls and he trips and his groceries fall on the ground. He's like, oh my goodness, look at this.
Peachy Keen.
Well,
my eggs.
And of course, as a kid, you would say, "Oh goodness, yeah, let me help you out." And he's like, "You want to see a magic trick?" And he's like, "Yeah, actually, I do like magic. Why not?" Mm-hmm. And then, of course, that's whenever he sprays him and knocks him out. It's things like that like really kind of digs at people at a personal level, because you're told this by your parents, and then this is the thing that happens to the kid, which is what your parents always told you not to do, and it's like, eek. Mm-hmm. Like that's what I think one of the reasons why it was it is so successful. I mean, it's blowing it off the planet. It's got an $18 million budget and it's made so far $153 million worldwide.
And I think the mass villain too as well. Those like, masks. It was originally a clown, and then Joe Hill wrote it, and his dad Stephen King. It just blew up, so they really wanted to get away from the clown vibes. So then they just put these masks on Ethan Hawke. But I think Ethan Hawke kind of loved it. Ethan Hawke has never really played a major villain like this before. Like he didn't want to be a serial killer who attacked children. He's a villain in Moon Knight, but that's more of like a PG-13 villain. He never wanted to be in taking lives.
He's never really gone full villain.
Yeah,
he is an evil dude. I mean, you could just
evil. There's nothing good about him. Like there's no
redeeming quality.
Yeah, and they like want Ethan Hawke said he has a diseased mind. And they said each mask represents a different personality of his, because he's like, I didn't do this, someone else did. So he's fractured, he's evil, he is absolutely done. And apparently he even had, in the short story, the kid's like messing with him by ringing the phone. But he maybe has some form of like telepathy. Tilapia, which is a great fish. You can put it on a bun, have it for lunch. Let's see, TLT, tilapia, lettuce, tomato. But yeah, he had those powers, but like it's the physicality of him too, because he just came off Northman. He was all jacked. So seeing this guy he's very childlike, but then you see how big he is and like strong. Like there's a lot of really interesting dynamics with this killer, and I think what I respect the most is this guy is gonna kill you. Like he's not. They don't make him friendly. They're not trying to make him. There's no bad mom. You know what I mean? There's no anything. It's just an evil being, and I think that sort of makes it kind of. I mean, just even more hopeless for the kid. I mean, the only reason this kid's not dead is because the brother, James Ransom, who was in it, his brother's staying with him, this total cokehead brother, and he can't really kill this kid because his brother's there. Mm-hmm. It's like this guy, remember in the book, he just killed the kids immediately. But the reason he can't do it, or the short story, he can't do it because the brother's there, and that's why the kid can hear the phone.
Now, I'd like a little bit of the difference between the book and the movie, which I liked more, was that there really wasn't much outside of the basement. You're literally trapped, and it was suffocating almost, like the short story, at least from the way I interpreted it, because we don't really go outside. The beginning of the book is Finney being kidnapped, and then he's in the basement, and then you never go outside of that. And it's really it's nice. It's interesting to read it like that. I liked some of the lines in that was that whenever they say that the air stung Finney's eyes when he went to go open them up, like there was something in the air that was physically hurting him. And then he said that his vision was like looking through Coke balls.
Yeah.
So it's like it was things like that would never be able to convey into a film. But I did like in the film where they padded it a little bit more, where they added a backstory. You could see that Finney was picked on. Mm-hmm. So that just another layer of like no one would really be bothered by him gone. Mm-hmm. And it's like do you think that whenever you see him being picked on, his sister clearly loves him, and he may have a girl that has a crush on him, but other than that, it's like you don't really see a lot really going on, except for the one baseball. Kid the kid who whips the tar out of everybody. Yeah. I love that character. I wish he was in the book, but
he talks about Texas Chainsaw Massacre too, which is also a classic. But yeah, I mean, I do think the additions that they made feel pretty organic in regards. Now, like the father, they brought in a whole subplot about the mom having powers and their mom committing suicide. So then Jeremy Davies becomes an abusive dad because he doesn't want his kids to have powers. You know, in the beginning.
But does he didn't, it didn't seem like, to me, it seemed like the dad didn't believe the mom had powers.
He just thought she was crazy.
Yeah. Because remember, he's just like, no, wait. He probably did believe his mom, believe the mom. Because he said, you're not your mother. Yeah. Remember that when he's beating the daughter, he's like, you're not your mother. You're not your mother. And she's like, I'm not my mother. And he's like, that's right. Your dreams are just dreams.
I think he just wanted to beat that out of her. Like he just wanted to condition her because he saw what the mom. That's the vibe I got.
Yeah, because if you know that your wife committed suicide, you wouldn't want your daughter to commit suicide.
Yeah, he's just so broken that they put a lot of emphasis on the nuclear plant that he works on. And I researched that nuclear plant, and it actually exists outside of Denver where they lived. And there was actually a lot of seepage of nuclear material. So, like in the beginning of the film, he worked at Rocky Flint's plant, which produced nuclear weapons, and it's outside of Denver. And it had two big fires which contaminated local areas. And there was a lot to do with like open barrels and getting into water sources. So I'm like, are they showing this? And is this why the kids have powers? I don't know. I like that they add those added wrinkles in it. The kids have powers. You've never really seen that in movies where they're kind of ride or die, those two, like Gwen and Finney. Like, you don't really get that relationship much in films. No. I feel like whenever a sister or younger brother is introduced, there's always that adversarial type relationship,
and one of them is usually like the weakest, like has to be the weakest. You don't usually have two strong characters. Not saying like Finney is more mentally strong, whereas his sister's more physically strong.
Yeah, and like Finney's cool. He can pitch, like he's an athletic kid. He can take a beating, which is good. These are two cool. Like I think this is one of the reasons why this movie works so well. The casting is spot on with these two children. I mean, they really bring it. Mason Thames and then Madeleine McGraw. Like I think they're really solid in this movie. But yeah, I guess the more I read about it, the more I think about Derrickson and how he's found a way with his horror films to really synthesize kind of like sinister, right? With the Bagul. It's Ethan Hawke watching home tapes of murder and then him slowly going insane while he's wearing a great sweater. So it's very much like a Final Destination or a Saw, where you're watching a guy watching people get murdered. But each tape sort of builds it further into the... Sinister's about watching those tapes and watching people get murdered, but there's also a really solid tale of a family who move into a house. I also admire the production design of Sinister a lot, because you keep the budget down by moving into a new house. So you just have boxes. So that's a good way to keep the cost down.
Smart move.
But it's... and like The Exorcism of Emily Rose, that was a sleeper hit, was it not?
Yeah, that movie was amazing. And I loved it. It was the little things about that movie that really stood out for me, because I remember when it came out on DVD and I bought it. There was a tiny little things, like the lighting just blew my mind. Like when Emily Rose is possessed, the lighting is really sharp and bright, whereas when they're telling the story, it's very like more natural looking. And one of my favorite shots of all horror films is whenever Emily Rose goes out to talk to Mother Mary on the farm, and everything is bright white except for this big purple light coming from the house. Love that shot. It's unbelievable. And it's those things that, and Scott Derrickson talks about that in the commentary, saying that not for the Black Phone, sorry. I don't even think this is available to rent yet. I think it's still in theaters.
Yeah, you can get it on Peacock, or you can buy it. You can buy it for $25 or rent it for $20.
Oh, okay. I haven't listened to the commentary track on this one, but he says in the commentary for Exorcism of Emily Rose that he does stuff like that in his movies, so that subconsciously you're thinking about something. Like it's something like that. It's really, really well. He's like he called it a Japanese horror trick.
Oh, okay. No, he does a great job of it though. I mean, Deliver Us from Evil, The Exorcism of Emily Rose, an Exorcist movie. We've seen those before, but he found a way to really bring people into the theater.
How do you out-exorcise the Exorcist?
Yeah.
And it's like, how do you do it? It's like, I think he did it. And to take it back to the Black Phone. How do you do a story that's already been done a gajillion times, especially in recent times?
Yeah. Precocious kids locked in a basement, the killer. I think adding the masks, they got that inspiration from 1930s, 40s magicians who would play the devil, and then like the regular magician. I think they just found a really cool way to really, like, this is what I love. And if you look back to cinema since this began, people have really, like the 40s, type in horror movies 1940s in Google, you'll see so many sequels and ripoffs, like, but I do love the movies like The Descent, which it's very much so a alien kind of vibe. It doesn't, but it's just people stuck in caves with monsters and you got to kill them. I love movies that find a way to feel familiar, but also excel within the genre. And I think by making such a simple story, which is what he did with Sinister and what he did with Black Phone, you can focus on the characters. You can focus on the villain, like very simple setup. Because there's not too much plot in this movie. This kid gets kidnapped, gets brought to the basement. He gets phone calls. His sister tries to help him. It's very easy to follow. But since it's so easy to follow and there's not so many twists and turns, you can spend more time with the characters, if that makes sense.
And you spend a lot of time with Finney.
Yeah.
Like you really start to see that he's figuring out what's going on. One of the things that was different in the book that was changed in the movie was that in the book, the grabber already knows Finney. He knows his name. Whereas in the movie, he does that whole scene, which was amazing. And this is one of the things I want to say. I know about 4K.
Chris Kelly has a 4K TV and player, and he talks about it on every single episode.
So I watched this movie in 4K and also in HD. I strongly recommend, much like with Malignant, watch this in HD. Don't watch this in 4K, because that scene that I'm talking about specifically, like whenever when the grabber's trying to get Finney's name, he's like, oh, I don't even get that information anyways until after you've already been killed, blah, 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 et cetera, et cetera. He's like, so what's your name? So I can gain some trust. And he tells him a fake name. And then he walks in, and the mask that he's wearing is this big frown. And it's like, ugh. Mm-hmm. Oh, God. But in the 4K version, you can see the mask already. So I was like, oh, well, this doesn't work. In the HD version, you couldn't see the mask. Oh. And he walks into the light, and you can see that you expose this gigantic frown. In the 4K version, you can see the mask, and he's frowning already. And I was like, oh, no.
Because he's not happy that he's being a naughty boy.
Yes. And that is awesome. And then he takes the food, throws it on the ground.
He's such a petulant guy. In the book, he just seems like more of a killer. He doesn't really care about games. He kills the kids before they can have a chance to get their strength. But in this one, they're like, he won't kill you unless you play the game.
Yeah.
And like, you have to play the game to lose the game. So that's how you defeat him. Just don't play the game, because then you can't lose it. And that's a pretty interesting take on this to sort of stretch out the plot a little bit rather than just a one night only survival type situation, if that makes sense.
I don't think it would work as a one night thing.
No.
Like it would be way too fast paced. It'd be like, but with this one, he stretches it out over like, was it like 2 weeks or a week?
Yeah, something like that. Because she starts having dreams. Her brother gets kidnapped. She goes to school. She sleeps, and that's a couple days.
A couple of days.
Yeah.
One of the things I thought was different with the book versus the movie. In the book, Finney is never given food, whereas in the movie, the grabber is constantly giving him food, and he wants him to have his strength because he wants him to play that game. Ugh. Whereas in the book, he's more like, I'll just starve him until my brother leaves, and then I can kill him. Which, I mean, it's different, but they talk about in the book that Finney actually drinks the toilet out of the back of the water. The water out of the back of the toilet.
Yeah.
And he drinks that in order to get some strength, which is okay. I mean, they mentioned a little bit of the toilet in the movie.
He takes a couple gulps.
Yeah.
After he smashes the wall and finds the freezer. And then the meat for the dog.
Because he's just giving him soda and eggs, I think.
Yeah.
Movie. So, I mean, it's food, but it's still not like something worthwhile.
Soda and eggs. I mean, I guess if you're a horrible, horrible serial killer making eggs and soda.
It's cheap.
Yeah. But yeah, I do like though that we know the character has a brother. We know the grabber has a brother, but we don't know its motives. The one thing that's interesting is you do learn that when the grabber grabs Yamada in the beginning, Yamada in the book is explained as having just amazing arm. He's just Bruce is an absolute athlete. He grabs Bruce. Then he grabs Pinball? The kid Pinball, who was the best fighter. But then he got kidnapped, and then Robin became the best fighter. And then Robin got kidnapped. So he's taking the sort of...
he's taking all the tough kids out.
Yeah.
Because in that way, you wouldn't have anyone to fight back. I mean, like, I guess that's kind of the way to look at it, is that if you take out the strongest people first, then all you do is have the people that everything else is easier. So they have no one to look up to.
He must be doing groundwork, right? Taking all the big, tough kids away.
You would think that he would have to go to the school sporting events to see these kids, or at least he has to be well known around town. He would have to be.
How do you feel about the inclusions of the black balloons? Because in the book, in the short story, I like their inclusion much more. So when Gwen sees them, she feels their evilness and that they're off. I love the explanation of that. And this one, he just sort of puts it in front of the kid and throws him into the van.
Yeah,
and sometimes sometimes you see the black balloons. It's like, oh, I know you saw the black balloons. It's fine, but I don't know, it reminds me of It. But still, it's I like the short story version of it. But I guess the balloons make for a good picture. You know, they make for a good way to find, you know, like where this guy's traveling. Because he's staying in the same area, this person. The cops are not.
Well, I mean, it was the 70s.
Yeah.
You got to remember, this is way before computers were really in mass use. They couldn't exactly Google.
Yeah, exactly. So, and they do go to the house. They find the brother.
They actually go to the actual house that the kids are at.
Snorting some coke. And he's actually right, too. Oh, my gosh.
That's funny. Yeah. Not funny, but you know what I mean. But that's like that scene, and he's just like, that guy, he's got to be right here. And it's like, he's actually in the house.
He looks at it and goes, wait a second. So why do you think this movie's made $150 million? It also keeps plugging along. This wasn't one of those top-heavy movies that makes $40 million, that makes $20 million, $10 million, $5 million out. This movie has chugged along. Like, what is it about this movie that...
I think it's a good, solid horror film. And I think that one of the things is that there's no, like, motive in it. Like, there's no hidden agenda behind it. It's literally just a straight horror. And I think that's kind of what people are interested in watching. They're not seeing... I mean, of course, you know, when it came out, you had Doctor Strange and all those other movies and the big blockbuster films of the summer. But there's always that crowd that just doesn't want to see that. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what we're looking at. We're looking at the crowd that doesn't want to see these movies that are overly produced. There's no hidden thoughts behind it. There's nothing that's going to like push anything down your throat. You're literally watching a good, solid horror film with a good storyline. And that's what it is. And I've said it before and I'll say it again. If you have a good product, people will buy it.
Yeah.
And that's what it is. It's a good product.
And it leaves you on a pretty good note. And I mean, look at the run. So it started off with 23, then it went to 12, 14. And then then it went set like 8 million, 5 million. Like it's had a good run. Like it just sort of plugged along, making good money. But I think like you said, it combines elements of what people love in horror films, does it in a very simple story. The kids' performances are really good. Mm-hmm. It's always interesting watching R-rated movies where kids are the leads, because these kids who are that age can't go see it. So you're just going and watching a movie where kids are in danger. But you know what, though? You watch A Quiet Place. In the opening of The Quiet Place, a child is murdered just to explain, like, hey, this world's dangerous. This one doesn't feel nearly as exploitative as that. I don't think this child endangerment in this movie, this kid never feels helpless, Finney. Like, he's always looking for something. He's getting the calls from the past victims. Like, they're trying to overcome this. So I think it does a good job of not going too bleak and not feeling too exploitative, if that makes sense. Like,
I think if they showed the kidnappings, I think that would be one step too far.
Mm-hmm.
The only kidnapping that you see is Finney's, which you have to.
Yeah.
But with the other ones, I love how you just see Yamada,
mm-hmm.
Bruce, whenever he's just going down the street and you hear Free Ride by Edgar Winter, and he's just going down the street, having a good time. You see some good-looking girls, waves, loves it, everything's good. And then you see the black van pull in.
Yeah.
And the same thing with the other kid, Robin. He's just walking. Looks like, I don't even know what he's doing in that back alley. But
yeah.
He's just kind of there. It's like,
that's the laziest of all the things. Yeah.
I thought that when I saw it, I kind of chuckled. I was like, what is he doing? Because he's just kind of like, it looks like he's going to work maybe, but he's 13.
Yeah, that's I'm going to take a shortcut behind the mall.
Didn't make a lot of sense, but he's just like, you could tell that kind of was, I think the reason why they did that was because Scott Derrickson wanted to show a good contrast with everything being white. And then you have this black van, and then you have the grabber standing there, which is pretty terrifying. And then as soon as Robin goes into that area, you know he's done. There's no way he's going to be able to run or find anything.
And I guess what's good about that scene is it shows that the grabber had done his recon. Maybe this kid takes that walk every day. Yeah, they're just waiting there.
To bring it back to what we were saying earlier, yeah, he has to obviously know these kids' routines and knowing what they're doing. Yeah. It's not just a random grab.
And you know what's interesting too? The director said, hey, Ethan, I'm covering up your face. The only reason Ethan took this job, he's like, it has to be like a Jack Nicholson-esque The Shining role, which makes me kind of happy. They both take place in Denver or Colorado. But yeah, they said his voice. Now, if you think about it, he does have a very distinctive, raspy voice.
It's very childlike, which is what I really like.
And before Sunrise, Megan knew I loved that movie, so she like made this clip involving one of his monologues. But he does have this like really raspy like voice, you know. And when he plays the grabber in the beginning, he's like, "Oh, peachy keen," like, "Oh man." But then when he becomes the killer, he's like, "I." Like he finds this rasp. So he has a very distinctive visual, like a vocal style that they use really well with these masks, and also the interchanging masks as well that like showcase his mood. But I think you really get a presence of this guy in this film. It also was weird seeing Ethan Hawke being buff Ethan Hawke. Have you ever thought it? Like, have you ever?
I never thought of him as a buff guy.
Yeah,
I always say he's just kind of a dude.
Yeah,
he doesn't seem like he's like muscular or thin or anything, and then boom, he's actually kind of jacked.
You're like, what's happening here?
I like how they did give him a slim cut clothing so to kind of look like he wasn't so massive. I noticed that whenever I saw him, because I know, like you said, the Northman had just been made, and I was like, he would be like. He was huge in that.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh yeah, when you watch this, you see him with this slim cut clothing. It's like, oh, okay. Yeah.
And also that shirtless scene adds some probably the most devious element of it, because the naughty boy element, they hint at, and even Derrickson admits it, that they hint towards some really dark things.
Yeah, he's ready to go, and it's like...
It's evil, though. But it's also, you want this kid to overcome it. It's good that they never show it. That would have been exploitative. The kid says, "Don't go up there." You don't go up there, so you know what threat is. Mm-hmm. So it's interesting about it's like a brother and sister trying to overcome some evil. But I guess that works on it too. If you think about it, you have kids trying to overcome an evil. Like I think that's maybe when that works, right? When it doesn't feel totally like Sixth Sense. A kid he's just dealing with seeing ghosts. This is a kid who's just been kidnapped and is trying to overcome it. None of the big hits, I think. Well, The Exorcist is certainly exploitative. Poor Linda Blair got put through the ringer. I know I keep going back to this, but I just found that most of the highest grossing horror films ever made feature a kid in danger, and this movie made a lot of money. Yeah. So it must be something that audiences are attracted to.
Yeah, then like I said in the beginning, that it all goes back to that thing that your parents always taught you. You know, stay away from this. I also wanted to make a mention about Ethan Hawke. He had prosthetics for his face. I mean, you could tell that. Like, you don't really see him without his mask except for like briefly. But if you watch him and look at it closely, his chin comes like out like a lot. So like it's like he must have had prosthetics for his face
just to make him look more off-putting,
to make him look just weird. And I think that was part of it. I mean, if you watch the movie again, you can see whenever Finney's walking up to his van, you can see that he has an like extraordinarily long chin.
And he has that makeup on, like the magician makeup in the beginning.
Yeah,
dude's creepy.
Yeah, now, a lot of people online have compared the poster to the same look as Lon Chaney had in London After Midnight, which is, for all horror fans out there, know that is the most sacred of sacred horror films ever, because there's no way any of us will ever be able to watch it because all copies of it have been destroyed. At least that's what we think. I personally believe that there's a copy out there somewhere that some big time horror collector is holding on to. Dude, like, come on. Like, like it's got to be like someone out there has to have this, like a big time name. Rob Zombie might have.
But the look is very similar. You are right. It's
very like the stovetop pipe and the stovetop hat, pipe clean. Ugh, what do you call them? Chimney cleaner's hat.
Yeah. Ugh. Chimney sweep
hat. And he also has the very big smile, just like in London After Midnight.
I mean, that's perfect that you say that. I just think what I love about Derrickson is he went back to, so he grew up in Denver. And he went back to like kind of what he remembered from the late 70s, 80s were just kids fighting and like violence and his blue collar, because it was very blue collar.
And that's true. I mean, yeah.
He did that, and then he combined elements of, an already successful Joe Hill thing. Then he added the Masked Killer, and he just found a way to synthesize it all into a really solid economical horror film. And I love that. I love when I really appreciate just straightforward. Like I talked about Collateral the other day, and it's a completely different movie from Black Phone, but it's just Tom Cruise in a cab with Jamie Foxx doing 5 stops. Like you have that simple plot, but then you can really build the characters. And I don't know. I guess that's where I'm going around in circles, but I do like exploring this movie that has continued to make money around the world. And it's got to be something Scott Derrickson's doing. He just understands the genre. Like, what do you think? Like Sinister?
I think he gets it. I think he just gets horror films. It's just he understands that horror fans out there, they want the basics. They want to have a good storyline. They want to have a lot of good everything in it. I mean, the Black Phone, like we said, it's a very basic kind of film. I mean, the things that sell it are the performances, and the main thing is just the two characters. And those performances sell that movie. It's not a big budget at all.
And the two detectives, they aren't jerks.
Yes.
They actually listen.
And not only that, but they're not stupid. They're both they're very down to earth, actual honest cops. And it's like, it's not like they don't make one completely dumb. They don't make one like constantly eating, which I hate that in movies when they do that, whenever they make
smacking gum.
Yeah, I just hate that. It's like, why are you doing this? Like, it doesn't add anything to it. It's like, or if they would have him constantly having a sandwich or something. It's like, no, but they say things that are honest and good. Like, at first when we're introduced, the one cop looks kind of like a jerk, but then when he meets with Max, he's bringing back the quality to himself. He's like, you might want to clean that up before your brother,
Yeah.
Knowing that in the 70s, like, everybody did coke. So he's like...
It was everywhere.
It was, I mean, he's
they had
like...
some in their pockets right now when they were talking that they got from the evidence room.
So he's like, you might want to clean that up before your brother shows up. Things like that. That's why I really like that.
And then they went to Gwen as an advisor later on. Like, hey, can we get your help? And even the dad later on, after the whole beating scene, which is brutal. And she's like, my dreams are just dreams. She sells that. That scene, oh my gosh. But when she goes to him later and tells him about it, he's pretty receptive to it. There's no more, like, there's no... But, like, there's no, like, Carrie, I'm going to lock you in your room. There's no... Like, he's a very, very, very bad dad. But it's not one of those bad dads in, like, Nightmare on Elm Street. I'm going to lock you in the house. So there's another problem to overcome. She still goes around riding around free range as a free range kid, cruising around when it's raining on her bike. So he's not the most... he's not helping totally, but it's also not locking the poor girl in a room. Or
he's not hurting her. He's helping her. He's saying, like, what you're doing is just dreams, but you're still going to be a little kid.
Exactly. And that doesn't give us another plot. Oh, I got to escape from the house. It's just, strange. It's like going down a highway, and that's not an insult. And that's why I think it's done well. It's a very simple film to absorb too. Like Quiet Place. Family on a farm has to be quiet because there's aliens who can hear noise. Like I feel like some of the most kids in Maine have to battle an evil clown. Like I think when you can synthesize that idea really well, that creates success, and that's what Black Phone is. And you could tell that, like he had been working on this since 2011.
Dang.
Yeah, and then he got involved with Doctor Strange, who was going to do the sequel, and then that fell off, and then they quickly jumped on this. But I mean, it's pretty cool. Like he sent Ethan Hawke the script the night before, and then Ethan read it and was like, "I'm in." Like it's cool, and I think it came together well. But I also think what the problem is, this movie came together well. It's not a big budget. I'm sure Scott Derrickson had carte blanche to do what he wanted, but it never. Sometimes you hear about how great sets are, and then the movie's kind of subpar. This seems like a pretty easy make, but it's still really good. If that, like, sometimes, when you don't have that $1 million and you're forced to shoot in 30 days and stressed, you come up with something brilliant. Like it seemed like they had everything they needed for this movie, and it still worked really well. So I think that's a good case of a filmmaker not being. What I'm trying to say is, they had everything they needed, but they didn't get complacent. Still made a good horror film, if that makes sense.
Yeah. To add to that, actually, a good friend of mine worked on this movie.
Carolina.
Yeah, I remember that. He was actually he was working on a show with me, and I remember him saying, "Actually, I'm leaving this show." He was only day playing with us, so it wasn't a big deal. But he was like, "I'm actually going up to North Carolina to shoot a show." It was this. Hey. He was the key PA on that. So he was part of the AD department, which is the department that I work. I asked him about his experiences on while working on this movie. And he said to me, "So for me, it was one of my favorite filming experiences. Logistically, it was pretty rough due to COVID at the time. And we also had a week of constant rainstorms outside that we filmed through. Almost all the exterior things, which would have been the girl on the bike, and a lot of the night scenes that was raining." He actually sent me some pictures and videos of this. Woo! That was some rain. Wow. That was like some Georgia winter rain. It was nonstop.
Barf.
But yeah, it looked like it was not a lot of fun shooting that, because if any of you have ever shot a movie in the rain, it is not fun. But creatively, it was awesome to be a part of. Scott Derrickson knew exactly what he wanted. This story was important to him, and he really took his time with each scene, making sure that the actors' performances felt right. All of the effects and stunts were practical and done on set. Madeleine, who played the sister, was phenomenal in her scene.
Yeah, she's great.
There were positive spirits and teamwork among the crew every day, and Scott continuously raved about the crew, stating that this was the best film crew that he ever worked with.
Whoa.
All the houses used were real.
Felt like
they were all in the same block, except for the basement, obviously, which was the set. All the effects were practical, as I said, and that this is pretty cool, and I think that you'll like this a lot. Is that the black phone was actually connected to another phone outside of the set. So whenever they would pick up the phone, it would ring to the black phone inside the set. And then the kids were actually there, and they were doing their lines on the phone to Finney while he was in there. So he was acting with the phone call, not someone reading the lines off the screen.
Oh, that's cool.
So that what makes that a little bit better is that as an actor, if you're actually communicating with somebody on a phone, you kind of have that phone voice. We naturally do that. Like, we won't talk as loud. Mm-hmm. But whenever you're acting with somebody, when you're talking on a phone and you're acting with somebody who's reading off a script, you tend to raise your voice a little loud.
Oh, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about. So Scott Derrickson, it seems like to me, he wanted to add that layer of realism. So we had the actual kids that were actually talking in the scenes, talking on the phone to Finney when he picked up the phone.
I mean, that's a brilliant move, too. I mean, I know this is a really random story, but in Roma, they had some inexperienced actors as the main characters. So the sets they built for it, where they put real tile in, they put real everything. Like, they built the sets like they were building a house. So when the actors were performing, they didn't feel cheap linoleum on their feet. They felt tile, and they could get in that world since they were inexperienced. So if you have a child actor who's probably acted a lot before, very talented, but that does have to help the performance.
Absolutely, yeah, definitely.
Oh, that's cool.
Another thing, whenever the dog is scratching in the closet, every time they open up the door, remember? And then maybe like when the cops open up the door,
yeah.
and the dog's going crazy. That's actually my friend and Law's doing that.
Nice.
Obviously, they put the dog track over it, but that's actually him that's doing it.
Those stories are the best when you have those.
Oh, yeah. They're so much fun. And he told me, he was like, also, I got to ring the black phone.
Oh, that's cool.
I thought that was pretty cool.
You know, you get the vibe from this movie that I feel like that's exactly what I see in my head is that this production going down.
Yeah, yeah. It seemed like everything they knew what they were doing.
Yeah. But sometimes I feel like when people know what they're doing, they have everything, you don't find that like desperation that you need from the $1 million budgeted Sinister.
Oh, yeah.
But they still keep it up. And, you know, he said he wanted to make kind of like he was watching 400 Blows a lot.
Oh, wow.
And he said he kind of wanted to make a movie like that. But then he also remembered this short story. So then he's like, I'm going to combine these. I'm going to combine the 400 Blows with like the Black Phone. And he also wanted to make a serial killer movie makes a ghost story. So you have 400 Blows, you have a serial killer movie and a ghost story combined.
And here's a shark.
Yeah. Sharknado comes through. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. Ethan Hawke has been churning out since he said that Sinister marked the next wave of his career. Because he's like Dad Hawk in that. He's not Action Hawk. He's Sweater Hawk in it. And then he went on to The Purge. And then he went on to Boyhood. And then he went on to Black Phone. So it's kind of really interesting how when you think about Ethan Hawke in the 90s, he was very Gen X. And then the kind of 2000s, they kind of made he still stayed quite indie, but now he's sort of embraced more low budget productions and MCU. But I feel like he's really enjoying this sort of career that Sinister kicked off. I find that quite, and also too, Sinister had to have been a tough role for him because it's just him. A lot of the movie is a camera looking at him when he's watching footage. It's like that had to have been a pretty taxing role. But he said in this one, in Black Phone, he didn't have to get much direction. He said he completely understood the character and like embraced the insanity of it.
I mean, yeah, it makes sense. I mean, he knows what his character is.
And then what about when he hits the mask off of him? That doesn't seem... I don't like that.
Yeah, I was going to say that. Personally, I didn't really like that because he's like, oh, my face. But we've already established the fact that he's fine with not having the mask.
Yeah, exactly.
And, I mean, the ending in the book is a lot like in the movie, except for he doesn't fall down that hole and then break his ankle. It's just, straight up. There's a fist fight. Very much similar, like he fills up the phone with dirt, beats him with it, and then pulls the cord around his neck. And I also liked how at the end of the book, there's no answering of the phone. They just take the phone, put it to the grabber's head, and he says, "It's for you."
What a great final line, though.
Yeah, I liked it. I thought that was pretty good. But then, of course, in the movie, if they did that in the movie, it'd be like, no.
Yeah.
But in the book, it works.
And yeah, they've padded it out. What, a 10-page short story? Is it because I listened to the audiobook? How long was the book that you read?
Oh, I didn't read the book. I listened to it on. It's actually, if the listeners out there want to listen to it, it's on YouTube. It's only an hour long.
But and it's really worth it.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought it's a really good short story in that like it's very compact and you just kind of hit with it. It's really good.
I mean, this might be lazy, but I think it could be an interesting. So I teach film. It might be interesting to have my students listen to this short story and then watch the movie and then do a breakdown of like what was added as like a script breakdown, because I like the additions that are made in this. And I like Gwen too. I like the extension of her character. And also, like I said, I found the brother-sister dynamic really great. I can't think of the last brother-sister dynamic that's been like this before. It's kind of sad because I think they've both been forced to be adults with they lost their mom, and then also dealing with powers and being the parent of their parent.
Yeah.
However, when he's slurping in the morning, I would have given the same reaction as Jeremy Davies would. He's like, they're going to hear you all the way in Boulder. Kid was slurping so loud.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty interesting because it's like you could tell that like they were trying to set up the show that the dad was an abusive drunk.
And he was like hung over and had a headache or something.
That kid actually is making a lot of noise. To be fair.
Yeah. The better scene is when she drops the bread, crisper, and makes the loud noise. So then he has a headache in the morning because he's hung over. I get that. But sober, not sober, high, not high, completely normal. That slurping is going to woof.
Yeah, it's pretty intense.
Yeah. And it's not fast slurping. Like if someone eats soup at fast slurps over 2 minutes, you're like, it's 2 minutes. But this kid's slurping every 20 seconds. You're going to be listening to that for a solid half hour. But yeah, I still like that nuclear shirt. I feel like they didn't, the nuclear plant. I feel like they were going to explore that more, but they didn't. But it's still
well, you got to make the black phone too.
Electric boogaloo. But what's interesting though is that Joe Hill, he didn't want to be about the clown to remind him of it. But when you think about, Stephen King called this movie Stand By Me meets like The Sixth Sense or something like that. And it's interesting that, you have Joe Hill writing about two siblings who have powers. If you think about Shining, like some of the kids have telepathy. In The Shining, Danny has telepathy. So Joe Hill is kind of going to his father's playbook a little bit. Is there any
mention of the same place, like from Firestarter?
Oh, no. I haven't even looked that up.
Maybe the dad and the mom were part of the same group of people that were tested on.
I should look that up because
I thought of that because it's like, well, then their kids would also have some form of something.
Yeah.
I mean, they never touched on Finney's powers, but I mean, no, or did they? I mean, was he really talking? We don't really establish if he's actually really talking to anybody on the phone.
That bottle stands up.
Isn't that neat how they did that?
Yeah. So
I saw that and I was like, that's what my first thought was when I saw the bottle moving around and standing up, and I was like, is he moving that? Like what's going on there?
Because he's clearly because they tell him, go dig a hole at this tile, go hit the wall to the freezer.
So is he communicating with them or are they communicating with him?
Because remember in the short story they said they called to mess with him. Yeah. So they're calling him.
So there's obviously like some type of connection with that, like the kids can control phone at least.
Yeah. But
since the grabber never gives him any food in the book, we don't really know.
Mm-hmm. So I think he is hearing, like, this isn't all in his head, but I don't know if he's the only one. I don't know if Bruce could hear him or not. Like, I don't know if
they all get smoked right off the bat.
Yeah. But yeah, so I think it leaves enough interesting questions out there, but you still get the vibe that, the sister has her visions, the brother can hear these things, and that's all you need, really, I think. But I did think the nuclear. That would have been. They really feature that.
That would have been a really nice touch too. I mean, they might add that into another, maybe a sequel, prequel type of things. I personally think, I don't know anything, but I think that they're probably going to make a sequel to this or a prequel.
They have, they're gonna
do it because those masks were so sick.
Yeah,
but they like him being like a mask maker also probably.
Yeah.
That's what I'm assuming that they're going to do, and then they'll establish something with the nuclear power plant. But they never mentioned any type of masks or anything in the short story, which kind of sucked. But at the same time, it's a nice added touch.
Oh, mask killer. Look at the Strangers. Like, when you think about the Strangers masks, Freddy, Michael Myers, mask. When you think about Jason, mask.
Masks.
Yeah.
He's got a bag.
After three, bag, like, you scream, mask. You sort of, like, the Purge, some of those mask killers are quite iconic.
Yeah.
And so they moved away from the clown because they didn't want to be like it, or like having it be John Wayne Gacy would be like a S character.
That would have been
too exploitative. Yeah. It would have been too real.
I think too many people would have called they didn't like that.
No, and so they made the right decision to kind of make it this mask because then you bring in but it's almost like Split.
And you can bring in you can have multiple different characters without having multiple different actors.
This movie's kind of Split, but without the telepathy. Because remember how the different characters are inside of him?
Yeah, that's such a good movie too.
And then you have the girl who, she cut herself because she's flawed. And then the kid who gets beat up and he gets imprisoned. And then this guy has different. See, I'm telling you, this movie Split made bank. I think it made $350 million worldwide. So
it made a lot. I remember that.
I really think Derrickson's found a way to cherry pick, which is fine. That's what every director does. But he's found a way to cherry pick, but make it his own and synthesize it. I keep saying that word. Have you remember in Good Company when Topher Grace is making that speech and he keeps doing this thing with his hands where he's combining his fingers and he's synergy. And Dennis Quaid's like, I hate him. But yeah, so I mean, you get vibes from so many different things, but it also stands on its own. And it's just cool seeing a movie like this make tons. Because listen, there's not there's no teenagers being exploited like Halloween with teenagers having sex, right? It's not a Final Destination movie where you just go to it to watch kids be murdered. It's not a Saw movie where you watch
adults get murdered.
Adults get murdered. This isn't like a slasher movie where you go to watch people get murdered. This isn't a Paranormal Activity found footage movie where you just watch and wait for people to get murdered. Like, not many people are murdered in this movie. It's just a really good, straightforward story. And there's a lot of skill to that. So that's why I kind of admire it. It never... You watch some of these movies and, yeah, they feel very cynical. I don't know, this one doesn't have a cynical vibe to me, so I dug it. What else you find? Any other good research? I do think it's interesting, though, that this is a Joe Hill story that takes place in Colorado. And then you have The Shining, which takes place in Colorado. And, most of the kids that have The Shine in it and in The Shining, they deal with abuse. So these kids are abused and they have powers. And then they use telepathy. And then there's also ghost kids like in The Shining. It's a whole universe.
This is like the entire universe that Stephen King has created.
Yeah.
And so like we're branching out more further out into it.
Oh. The Joe Hill, Stephen King universe?
I mean, obviously, like, Stephen King will eventually die, but Joe Hill could expand more and more and more within this world.
Yeah, because he already combined, in Nosferatu, he brought in the Dr. Sleep Shining world. That's connected. So, the world's there, Chris Kelly.
It's going to be good. I mean, I'm looking forward to having more of these expanded into this world if they do decide to do that. I know that Scott Derrickson's next movie is going to be Labyrinth, but...
Labyrinth?
Yeah, he's going to be doing like a remake of that.
No.
Yeah.
He's remaking...
It's on his IMDb. I don't know how truthfully.
No, I believe you. That's not like a I don't believe you no. That's more of like a...
No.
Yeah. No.
Personally, I never liked Labyrinth, so I don't really care. But I think he'll do a good job with it because he doesn't really do a lot of CG except for with Doctor Strange. But then again, Doctor Strange is not really his movie. I mean, let's just be honest. Anytime a Marvel movie comes out, they're not the directors who direct them. They don't actually have a lot of hands-on on them. Mm-hmm. But Scott Derrickson, I think he'll probably have a little bit more of his own hand control on Labyrinth. And who knows, he might make it into like more of a horror film, which it is a horror film if you watch it. It's like
goblins.
It's shot as a family film, but it's like it's not pleasant what happens in that movie at all.
I love those kind of PG movies, though. Ernest Scared Stupid. That, like, where kids are in peril.
When are those movies ever going to get a 4K release?
Nightmare Before Christmas. I love movies where kids can watch them, but they're also... I feel like you have to, like... There's some pretty weighty themes and scares. Like, I love those movies as a kid. Yeah, exactly. I love Hocus Pocus. Like, I love those themes growing up. I do want to say real quick, Deliver Us from Evil, which he directed. It's like...
No, yeah. I mean, Eric Bana with the...
And like leather jacket, and like and like Joe McHale is knife fighting. It's not like a demon. All right, we'll move on from there. But what else you got for me?
I mean, across the board, everyone really likes this movie. I mean, usually whenever we talk about a movie, I try to find different critics that will either they usually like it, they're kind of indifferent on it, and then one that hates it. With this one, it was impossible to find anyone who really didn't just love it. I mean, everyone was saying, wow, like this is like across the board. This is fantastic. Probably the best review that I read was from Peyton Robinson from
Roger Ebert.
Roger Ebert.
Yeah. I read that one. Four stars.
Yeah. And it's fantastic. The Black Phone is a saga of support and resilience disguised as a semi-paranormal serial murderer flick. Underpinned by emotional performances across the board and a commanding atmosphere, The Black Phone aces its foundational qualities and allows its nuances to take control. The gore is secondary to the story, which is an excellent move.
Yeah.
With character development taking its first string, which is what Mark and I have talked about. But by no means does the film neglect the thrill. Rather, it's your care for Finney and the intensity of the film's skillfully crafted suspense that draws your knees to your chest and your nails to your teeth.
Well, that much more succinctly sums up everything that I've been warbling on about for a while. So thank you very much.
Yeah, I love this movie.
Yeah, it's good. I'm glad we talked about it. I'm glad you joined me. And I know you normally like to do a lot more research, but there's so much out there now that I felt safe covering it, despite it being relatively new. We still covered a lot.
Yeah.
This was good. All right, ready? Chris Kelly recommendations.
Whenever I come on Movies, Films, and Flicks, I like to recommend a film that I think complements the movie that we're watching. So if you consider the Black Phone to be the main course, this is more like the mashed potatoes or the side of
I love
carrots.
some mashed potatoes.
I'm a big fan. I mess up that stuff. Actually, I got some at the house right now. So the movie that mainly came to my mind. Now, I watch a lot of films and a lot of TV shows, and sometimes you come across a film that's so unique that you really don't find anything that kind of goes with it. This was one of those movies. I couldn't really think of anything that kind of complemented it really well to the point that someone was like, oh yeah, that kind of goes with it. But I did find one, but it is part of a film series. Now, I don't know if you remember this, but about 15 years ago, there was a series that came out called The Masters of Horror.
Yeah.
So there was one episode of that. No, The Masters of Horror was really cool. It was done by Mick Garris. And if you don't know who Mick Garris is, he wrote Hocus Pocus. He wrote Critters 2. He wrote a bunch of different...
He directed the Shining miniseries. And
he did. And honestly, I think that one... Some people say that one's better than the Stanley Kubrick one. People who are hardcore fans of the book really did not like Stanley Kubrick's version of it because he didn't really capture the whole essence of The Shining. Whereas a lot of folks have found that Mick Garris's version of it really did. It is an excellent horror film. It is an excellent miniseries. If you can watch it, I'm not sure where to find it, but it is excellent. It's very well done. He created this film series called The Masters of Horror, which was he would get the top names of horror. They could do whatever they wanted. They were given free range basically to do whatever they wanted, which you got the most bonkers stories. And some of them are some of them are really, really, really good. Like Takashi Miike's Pelts, or Jennifer. Those are great. And then you get some that are kind of subpar. You have the Washingtonians, which I think was like more of like a thriller than anything else. But We All Scream for Ice Cream is probably the one that I think complements this one the most. And essentially what it is about a mentally challenged man who dresses up like a clown. He sells ice cream. And then the neighborhood kids think that he's kind of a weirdo and a creep, so they kill him. Kind of like Freddy Krueger type of thing. He then comes back after the kids have grown up and have kids of their own. And now this person that sells ice cream is kidnapping and killing their children.
Ooh. Who directed that?
I
just stumped Chris Kelly.
Oh no, I wrote it down and then I guess
you know
I didn't sign.
If you had written that down in your recommendations, just throw it away.
Oh no. I swore I wrote that down and then I guess I didn't save it. Oh my gosh.
Chris Kelly's tearing up over here.
Oh, I'm frantically I'm trying to find it. 2 seconds.
Right here.
All right. So it was directed by Tom Holland.
Oh, of course.
The famous filmmaker behind Child's Play and Fright Night, Psycho 2,
Not
which
Spider-Man?
is also...
Jeez.
He also did a little bit of work on Psycho 2, which is where he had met Mick Garris. He's still making movies to this day. He's making up next. He has The Tarot, and probably he's not really directing anymore. But he's more hands in other things.
I mean, he made some classics. He can hang out.
Oh yeah, he's definitely done his thing. He also did the immortal classic Langoliers.
Ooh, another Stephen King.
God, that movie stunk.
Yeah.
But that's a whole other story.
Oh, we're doing the Stephen King universe here. I like it.
There's a lot to it. Hey, he also did Thinner.
Oh,
that was actually a good movie.
I like that guy.
I don't think that movie gets its day in court because I think that people just watched it and they were expecting something else. But it is genuinely a good movie.
I like the lead in that. He's funny.
Oh, he's fantastic. He drastically drops all that weight, and then it's like, oh gosh,
Thinner. All right, well, where can people find you, Chris Kelly?
I'm available
right behind you.
I mean, if you want to look me up on Instagram, CLK264. You just Google my name; it'll pop up. My IMDb will pop up. I've been worked on a ton of different movies. My podcast, Classic American Movies, I do it with my wife, where I introduce her to movies. And we both do deep research on them, and she tells us her thoughts on them, on these films. And
you should do your Chris Kelly 4K reviews. Man, well, thank you for joining me, Chris Kelly.
Thanks for having me, man.
All right, so for me, Mark Hoffmeyer, and for Chris Kelly, this is Movie Films and Flicks. We'll see you next week.